You guys may begin.
Yeah.
One here, there's a chance announcing the shop later, where you terminate time for an argument, 6 minutes, person every time convenient, there's otherwise a 2 around after arguments, will play defense after your first, must start around the strategic thoughts before the line reviews, 171, C2 interpretation, if either the debater proposes a consequential disparity must be rule based to clarify no util violations, preemptive violates that they read util standards, accessibility, util is inaccessible, A, that responsible to maximize the benefit for a larger program with mass amounts of prep, B, util justifies atrocity since it justifies allowing us to harm some for the benefit of others, even if they face some pain quantifiability argument that doesn't solve since there are instances when some get great benefits from others harm. C, util can't justify intrinsic wrongness. We can't know whether or not our action was good until we have the validated the states of affairs they produce instances based on the outcome of the action. For example, if asked the question is great bad, a utilitarian will not be able to say yes because there are situations in which it would be morally obligatory to do so to maximize pleasure. Now, the meta-ethics constructivism ethics do not exist transcendentally but are created by agents. One, naturalistic problem. Constructivism can bridge at this gap between our inability to perceive moral facts and our creation of moral rules through a normative procedure that makes our judgments legitimate. John 15. Third effects establishing servers and tennis tracks now good for a tertiary universe. You believe you serve first because you think that this is constructed by a coin toss. There are words that make realism impossible. Nevertheless, our discourse supports to be objective constructivism. The layers of methodological objectivity are constructed by a procedure. Two, epistemology ideas are generated through interaction rather than spontaneous introduction. And agent proposes the thesis responded by antithesis and two conjoined a form of synthesis that we use as the basis for communal action. This epistemology is necessary. A, contradictions. It prevents the introduction of two truths that appear in different agents, absent ability to reconcile the legitimacy of each claims, which should allow them to exist simultaneously. B, refinement. Ideas become better through time as agents interact with their own assertion of the truth against one another rather than asserting one claim as true and demanding its application universally. This means the negative antithesis is not necessary rejection, but rather an incorporation of the affirmative to establish a refined thesis. Volition or structural rules thus a precondition for ethics and intrinsic value. A, proceduralism. The goal is the mechanism by which every agent engages in any activity, which means regardless of the content of any ethical theory, the ability to will that theory is in terms of good. B, foundations. The will is the basis or constitute an ethical subject, which means its relation to the world of primary ethical consideration. C, motivation. The structure of the will is the primary source of all reasons, desire, beliefs in it, generates what counts as motivational to the subject. Now, however, ethical theories evaluate the will based dilemma. They're either paternally objectivist to the extent they restrict moral will, or they are weakened by subjectivism to the extent it's possible to make true moral claims. 14. Theories of the objective for beyond sovereignty of individuals to interpret from psychological objectives increase the possibility of good for human by identifying the set function of inherent human nature. There should be love each individual, how you look like if you have realized objective ideals appear paternal, even if something to be commissioned on the basis of the Constitution. These imply very little when it comes to how validating happiness in their lives. The only solution to the concept of alienation that understands the will in a functional capacity to relate itself in order criterion that's concerned with how one wills rather than what one wills. This culminates in an act of procreation, the ability to view yourself as a practical agent capable of taking over a project that actually changes your own subject and the role itself, maybe too. Appropriation, one party has anything something our own, we can go part of themselves in appropriation, public states and make them our own, and we can mark on what we do, and both of us appropriate or appropriate version for a successful appropriation would require the world one's own without it having already been. Appropriation mandates recognition by other agents since the adopted world as your own requires the community to recognize you as an agent with the capacity to do so, vice versa. 13. Focusing on the brutality of colonialism will leave unchallenged more unchallenged for several forms of colonialism, most collective political agents that wrong within a larger family of wrongs that deny members equality, objective relations, and sinking nature requires no normative defense. We still need a morally acceptable way of establishing new political associations. Thus, the serious consistency with the principles of ethical community impact of A. Government should aim to prevent alienation as well as create policies that are inclusionary and recognize agents. So, B. Criticisms of the standard are fallacy of misapplication because only a concept that can criticize those misapplications can result in now. I contend the United States ought to become party to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court as a general principle. I'll defend that Parkinson's non-specificity insofar as it caused me to abandon my maxim one alienation. The act enhances the normatively legitimate ethical community of nation states in which they interact, which resolves political alienation. U.S. joining is key because we ought to promote the inclusion of nations into the ethical community which solves political alienation. So tough. Interactions for interpretation or enunciation of the global norm applicable to the situation participation will help reconstitute the interests and even identities of the participants in the process or national legal process to promote compliance states through valid cooperation or participation in international regimes leads them to develop a simple obligation community play an important role in maintaining and shipping legal rules states and identities all shaped by global regimes international laws generated through international social interaction while it requires that actors build collaborate to build understandings of the world and not uphold the practice legality when the case is decided by international court these represent interactions. 2. The ICC is a great ethical community good between 1. Criticism not representative African peoples, rather allocation of local leaders of authoritarian power who fear prosecution for historically strong African support seeks trusted African Americans intended to adjudicate crimes fairly tries genocide that statute applied equally to all without distinction based on official capacity of any crime committed in the region in which the national courts have no ability to prosecute until now. Allegation of pressing by African leaders, not by peoples, African scholars, activists and others supporting ICC service conducted across 30 countries in Africa reveal allegation of press by only serving African authoritarian government citizens believe officials always go unpunished. Court has regarded a majority of African leaders as supportive of African ideals by attempting to punish court as standing up for African victims because of as effective institutions. Now, 3. Psychology proves it fosters non-alienation. Kirsten 20. International proof on housing in the independent fighting space of MD psychologists. Insight was all undertook mental journeys where worse acts are revealed glimpses of humanity into the defendant and precludes from considering the defendant as a monolithic monster. These are real persons' appreciation of realities, foster compassion, humanization, not signal apologia. Leaders of armies look ordinary, thought of family, such sentiments prompt complex thoughts. Now, the case method. 1. Consequences fail. 1. Otherwise, ethical theories hold agents responsible for consequences external to their will, which removes any reason to be moral agents because an agent cannot control whether they're being punished for. 2. Aggregations impossible since there are a way to quantify different amounts of pleasure. Having 2 headaches equal 1 migraine. 3. Induction fails. This single here to justify the path to justify behavior because there's no logical certainty why having before what happened again. 4. Since it requires and states we can't know whether action was good or not until afterwards taken, which means the judge cannot determine whether the neg was good until which means their framework is impact justified. 5. Consequences empirically impossible to predict for policy actions. 5. The long concerns making 184 people who they're living off from political advice on economic strength. They made 82 throughout 361 forecast. The expert performed worse if they were assigned equal probability to all outcomes. Let's skip this 6, 7.
Okay.
Let's look at all outcomes.
Yeah. Tell me when you're good for cross.
Yeah.
I guess I'm confused how you can you explain how you find and determine what is a good ethical community versus a bad ethical community?
Well, we say that there are ethical communities and they're not. The idea
Wait, yeah, but how do you decide
sure.
what is good?
Ethical communities entail like societies where communities and agents where every agent recognizes another agent's volition, right? We tell you that as an agent, everyone has the intrinsic volition, which is
Sorry, what does that mean? The ICC you have said is an ethical community. Why is it good?
Okay, yeah, we give you 2 warrants, right? We give you 3 reasons. We give 3 pieces of evidence. First, the Gooder 21 evidence tells you that the ICC is founded on great intentions. It seeks to prosecute.
Okay, so it's founded on great intentions. Why does that make it good? Why?
Because it's an ethical community, right? We tell you that this community of the ICC is worth joining for the United States because they aim to prevent alienation, right?
They aim to prevent alienation. Where have you read that in a card?
Well, that's the point of the ICC is.
How do they aim to prevent alienation?
Okay, well, ICC aims to prosecute people who have committed crimes against humanity. The process, we care about the intention of joining the ICC.
Okay, we care about the intention. If the ICC only prosecuted people people unjustly, would that still make it a good ethical community? Should we still join it?
I don't understand.
If the ICC upheld systems like slavery, colonialism, etc., is it still a good ethical community because it aimed to prosecute colonialism?
I don't understand what you mean by
the ICC
prosecutes unjustly.
Wait, okay, say the ICC only prosecutes, or say the ICC framework.
We tell you that the criticism that we preempted, like the criticism is how it's not representative of African people. Rather, it's an allegation of local leaders of authoritarian power.
Wait, that's all inductive reasoning. Can you?
That's the Gooder 21 part.
The Gooder evidence says in the past the ICC has been good for African victims. That's induction. Can you explain deductively how your framework explains finding a good ethical community?
Okay, again, we tell you that to prosecute the intention to prosecute people criminals who seek to commit crimes against humanity is a good intention because making these crimes against humanity causes alienation, causes people that the harm is inflicted.
Experiment. You have the option to lie to someone or not to lie to someone. If you choose not to lie to someone, they will go and lie to 10 other people and commit the violation 10 other times. Would you lie to them?
Well, I mean, I think it depends, right? I would not lie to them.
You would not lie to them and allow them to commit that violation 10 other times.
It also depends on what types of lies you're talking about.
But again, not lie to them.
That's not my fault that they take those lies.
Wipe your hands.
Right.
Okay. That's fine. I guess.
The idea is that, yeah, sure.
Why
we can talk about
why do consequences fail?
Why do consequences
fail? I've heard the card that you read.
The Manito 5 card.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Manito 5 card consists of 82,361 forecasts from policymakers that try to predict certain policy events and policy actions and their outcomes. Statistically, they were assigned 3 equal probabilities to all outcomes, and the cause of that was a statistical error. It just does not make sense.
Sending out to them, Kate's.
2 cases.
Oh, sorry, I'll just take. Right, any independent reasons to drop the team?
If you read this all.
Okay, what's in desk, right?
Is it Excel or no, not Excel? I'll let you know when I.
Yeah.
Probably. There you go.
One of your theory hedge is wrong, and unfair just means that the applicants every time that, or sorry, wait, Jesus. That just means that the applicants every time theories rather than one year, which is unfair and logical because the app is one that introduces this argument in the first place, based on argument circular, no drop debating work, if you have not introduced the theory argument when you have, so it does not matter now, first off, the counter as conflict in the United States to submit itself to the jurisdiction of the ICC, except the crime aggression council does not become part of the ICC, so the ICC includes crime aggression particles, the ICC submission to have the literature too. Actions last by President and President Trump do not understand what I see that there's the last order of the court of American reporter when acting the court takes it from purchase and interacted where when the state friend murder attack and make personal victim song she referred to the court that murder changes mission stay on course of this it's in full seats and these some situations have grown involving two jurisdictional charges of to the court which might involve having to business loan drops to the court of federal without the United States and state party and state can submit itself to the court for not from forgets the article for nature as before I see that you satisfy the crime question take property without layer exception, but not the crime aggression HRW 10. Court searching no protection of weapons from the take aggression was conducted under which the court could exercise jurisdiction and you dex commitments for the legal first principle team. Under congregation members of law each other on statute use the reverse this then for coalition and multinational missions from governments to use the United States on take over versus growing man and restore peace and free forces and yes go going along real spirit insurance water and beauty control and segregation capacity coalition protect self and information and security folks know so if you're on the street for checklist route check this first trade route which is 5 complexities war which takes out community space and moves the virtually that's happening 15. Trouble with rules and strength not either thinking of more war that intervention to run naval air forces rules and structure by the purchase and use and affects the law it's just going to the exact execution of the evaluation not be there checklist more like this and another playing Netflix receptors for new security that reduce the shelter 23 conservative nuclear that's why there is a the facts of each defeating great companies and no longer regarding as a last program you see them and the resource you would use that towards case including some Article 8 restriction states which from these force that means more control like Article 15 and use Article 8 restriction they become generally welcome risk modeling also incorporating in case first I stand for long action they and something perhaps about something as a village general coalition snacks all this global license literacy all approximately working with news correlate possible the number of state members of 119 ICC I see the only year most populous countries about the product populous countries and pitching I support people which would 13 and 16 1 to 09. The active amount of the nation good into prosecution which I nothing just drives the prosecution reported but the mission last is then the trouble it's starting to be successful treatment using my by the German investigation and level it open has me back in 09 not that years to go to the we should try to part of so need to keep it down practitioner otherwise properly counter after crossing on you could 02 Amnesty South Africa she's regarding the victim regularly fair like I'm going to like the religion, to want to the primary department, at least where I took her to one which would not support the other program, they'd like to shine on the home, which is there's negotiations for carbon seas, police, without the picture of the sea member, although it should go over to cooperate, to cooperate and skip the next part of the case. First is the IC is not first is the util or the IC is not a good local community IC is a political institution in which both society and funding that's for 2018. Since its 79 in the local acting power properly building of UNC over the exceptional after large crimes and controversial state pipelines and working with funds and state care for a nation of important community right along with the sanction IC from the colonial design and it's something IC was from the US recognized two threads. It is the court's terms because when I see concedes that that colonial specific cause for interest in alienation. Now the util IBI is wrong. First is that first is util is not said they have not written no research by util specifically in schools and we would say that it's easier because it feeds into our intuitions that will be below no atrocities with no scenario or pleasure for great for example whatever outweighs the pain that is caused from it. So you should whatever outweighs the pain that's caused from it and now util is true. First is equal respect and the util respects you or actually we'll do the line by line now here. First aggregation definitely first aggregation definitely is true yes aggregation moral quality until equal weight aggregation nutrition definitely so all 30 days even close affirmative definitely or the negative definitely won't be the other stuff will be functional util is true. One is equal to respect only util respects the quality of person here in 7 to build a different world here and after other things other designs they don't do the same economists each children for each other and trying to be wants us to do what we can do for the south end of the rest of our listeners street ends as it different people as equal is to show equal respect for all each other result makes and sub other finance like structure that's the same as the finance and do so nothing to change people by digging equal each there and their entrance then it would say on the list object and undermining each other it would undermine con two and goodwill actions are defined by the conflict and the only basis for moral evaluation here in 7 killing it and constantly going for only the about the constant insubordinate which makes feeling right on going up disagreements which I'm trying to tackle which I'm trying to establish and intentionally when it's all except to bring my constantly must be here goodwill must live in like that way and that's consequences for value is for value across promoting the existence and rational weeks to 90 that's 90 the formula of evidence such as everything will be confidence duty like other than maintain to be happy it's an extra desire of rational being for a happy to reject the presence of the laws and whichever obligations to protect and action goodwill is sort of the weakness and the condition by you from their eyes objectively good which happens to since happiness is and for all happiness that's initial values on value rational nature can only have proportional value the proportional value and personal laws based on value rational and from the future valuable more often more necessary existing function things to roughly happiness rational at rational beings and induction is reliable and necessary for policy making. That's where the 2014. A man suffering from sequences of market application of the decision of the remedy directed the remedy objectors on the solutions protected by time predictions. They have predictions. They rely on objectiveness is or they're often proofs and clean hands is wrong. They don't simply the place of one's own clean hands is more important than the dignity of larger crowds. Process proofs.
We good for
yeah.
Right, why is it so true? You read con is false, but why is it so true?
Well, the warrants in the cards are still disproving your
Okay,
theory as well. They say that the only way, essentially, that we're able to find moral duties or that we're able to create moral communities as per the 1EC is by respecting everyone equally and maximizing the perfect duties, which are
what are perfect duties?
Yeah, perfect duties would look like maximizing happiness and pleasure and pain and the ability for someone to experience pleasure and pain that obviously precludes that because extinction ends life all life long.
Do you defend what type of like utilitarianism do you defend?
We defend maximizing
Here. I guess like is fairness important?
Maybe I guess sure I guess it depends on
like as like in context of this round, what do you say?
I mean why?
I'm just asking you, do you think fairness
You think that the judge should evaluate each argument
fair?
and at its full weight?
So do you think the judge should evaluate the debate fairly?
I mean, I don't really understand the implication. I guess we would say that when we deliver an argument, if it's true, we think it should be evaluated like a true argument.
Okay, sure. I guess like the more on the framework, you say that the the equal respect arguments, how does equal respect have anything to do with happiness and pleasure?
That's not quite what the card is saying. The card is,
Sure.
well, sure, if we would say equal respect is how we decide what is like a good duty, or how we decide what are good
Yeah,
moral systems,
where
or
the card
good
is actually
moral
saying.
communities. Sorry?
The card, where the card
Wait, no, okay. In order to treat people with equal respect, which we would say is good, like I think your theory would say that it's good too, is by maximizing.
Is
pleasure.
extinction bad?
Yes.
Why?
Extinction is bad because it precludes the ability to be able to experience pleasure in the future, because it
Why
ends
is
all like.
pleasure a moral value?
Because all of the cards that we read below say that the only way to maximize equal respect, the only way to maximize
Which card
rationality.
specifically talks about pleasure and
Wait, hold on.
we need to maximize pleasure under utilitarian.
To treat, well, okay, it says to treat different people as equal is to show equal
Okay,
respect for all, util is the result.
It's about, I'm asking about pleasure. You just told me that you defend like death is only valuable because we receive pleasure. Which card warrants that?
Yeah, that's the evaluating consequences is necessary to promote freedom and happiness of all people.
Okay, again, where does it say pleasure?
To promote freedom and happiness of all rational beings is the pursuit of the goal. Pleasure, happiness, we would say are synonyms.
Okay, sure. That's time. Are we using 5 or?
I
Judge, you know, it's 5. It's 5, okay. I use Brennan starting. Okay, here it is. This is a new shell. I'll send you the shell. Order will be, let's see, the overview. And
I
then,
see the order of the pages.
oh, so I guess so the first one is the new off.
Okay.
And then, wherever you float, you, no util, so,
Case.
yeah, so, yeah, and then the framework.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But actually, let me use 10 seconds. We all good.
Yeah, just new off in case.
Okay, Time will begin on this.
Fairness comes first, aid evaluation, even if their argument seems true, that's only because they already have an advantage. Fairness is a matter of country on the judge's ability to determine who best wins the round. If one debater has 10 minutes to speak and the other only has 3, there will be incongruence that alters the ability to judge who wins the round. So cross applications do not work. B, it's inescapable. Every argument you make concedes the authority of fairness. That was justified in cross text. C, and again, in the absence of justice, the debater reciprocal relationship, they should just hack against before you now. Extend advocates 1AR theory to deter future abuse and infinite abuse, and we would only read 1AR theory as a reaction to the 1NC abuse, which means there are arguments about how the app will win every single round is incorrect and it's not warranted anyway, so you can't vote on that. So we do get 1AR theory now. They can still read counter inserts to our 1AR theory. So no, the times 2 and tracks 2 warrants should be read in the 2-1R because 1 would be new and 2 that was not justified. So you have to hold the 1NC to the line now. Interpretation of the affirmative defense, if either debater defends a consequentialist framework, they must explicitly delineate which theory of the good they defend in the form of the text in in their constructive. Each nuance of the ethic entails different obligations and would exclude different officers, seven different versions. Acid, consequentialist theories include hedonism, which holds pleasure is important. Individuals maximize their own pleasure, Epicureanism that defines happiness as tranquility. Egoism holds good for self-asceticism, the opposite of egoism. I cut the rest of the part there. Now, the violation they don't, and maximizing expected well-being does not cut it. Chris 17. Well, well-being system is independent of interest. In the case of utility, it has become standard to distinguish theories of well-being as either hedonist desire or objective list of theories. The violation here is especially relevant because they have made the claim that pleasure is intrinsically valuable, but then go on and all their parts talk about how happiness is the ultimate value of utilitarianism, which means there's a bind because either they advocate for Epicureanism or they advocate for hedonism, and the one they are cannot know what to respond to because cross-ex just did not work. Now the standards are one shiftiness. They can shift out my terms based on whatever theory of the good they operate under, due to the nature of the vague standard, especially true because the warrants for their standard could justify different versions of consequentialism as coming first, and I wouldn't know until the 1AR, which gives them multiple access to 200, which gives them multiple access to contingent standards, 2 strikes. Do I lose 6 minutes and 7 minutes of my time during the 1NC to generate a strategy because I don't know what counts as turn or strategy? Cross-ex was terribly shifty. Now,
I won't go for the utils, no util stuff. In case.
Top level on the negative is that they do not win why life is intrinsically valuable, and cross-ex cannot justify that. Cross-ex claims life is only valuable because pleasure is intrinsic to human beings, but the 1NC reads happiness warrants. We prefer text over spirit because we tell you that the pleasure and happiness are different and that they fall under different philosophical theories of utilitarianism. And next, they conceded the whole entire constructivism page, which means that ethics are only relevant because Asians have collectively agreed upon them. We do not read Kant. Rather, we tell you that this means that violating one's ability to engage in the process is the worst evil, and promoting the ability to engage in deliberation is a moral good. That loads app. They conceded our theory of dialectics that tells you how every Asian proposes a thesis responded by antithesis to form a new synthesis to resolve any of the settler colonial theories. They say because if the people who are being settled on cannot provide their antithesis to the ICC's thesis, then that means that it would be bad under our framework. But our framework result of that now. Extend the offense from alienation that tells you the app enhances the normatively legitimate ethical community of nation states in which they interact, which results in political alienation. This 212 was a draw argument. They say that the ICC is bad because they target African nations, but wrong. We tell you that they're targeting African nations because that's where a majority of global civil wars are. Secondly, we tell you that they also target other countries, i.e. like there's a arrest warrant for Putin, Netanyahu, and leaders of Hamas. Next, we will also tell you that African leader that the Arguder 21 evidence specifically answers this because we tell you that that the criticisms of the ICC are coming from these the abusive African leaders, which means that all of their evidence it relies on the powers of people, the statements of people who have been abusing millions of lives on the daily, which again explains why the ethical theory comes first. Again, the shell should come first, fairness first.
The argument is that having like the several people having their like being alienated from society, that they should be able to have their antithesis responding to like the ICC thesis to ultimately form a synthesis that ensures that neither of them are alienated. Should that together.
That's the new shell. The shell, the TRC decide, the submit to jurisdiction counter plan, the, it's the shell, the TRC decide, the submit to jurisdiction counter plan.
Your accountable to. You could say.
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah. I can do that. For the counter, it was just debaters. That is not. I can send this to you.
Like that.
Be like the shell, and then the 1 AR theory shell is gonna be below that, but like it's gonna be. Okay,
New shelf?
but your 1 AR
Yeah.
theory is legit stuff, is right below the specs.
Oh, okay. So there.
Counter interpretation makers can read the paper because it expect and maximizing effect well-being. For one is wrong by usual is good. Usual is true that intercourse is depend morally. Wrong theories, which is obviously bad, and drops all the reasons why their theory is morally wrong, which obviously is worse. It turns all of their offers from what I see. Usual is more true, is usual more textual, and severe. Real world policy discussions and dense philosophy need to understand Phil. In the first place, three is atrocity, non-usual justifies the intent to stop. And someone from separating the show, which allows larger atrocities, and your experience usual is moral correction, everyone equally leads to charge of animal rights, etc. And drops all the reasons why usual is true, and the one sees usual is true anyway. Next is wrong acting or treating wrong depending on knowledge available to a person or person in action. Five is that next is that no NC word for accident term usually is more accessible because in your real world policy discussion that's philosophy you need to understand and shiftiness is wrong. A is that we're not shifty or we're not shifty. B is that there's just as much academic variation among other philosophies. Second is that their only card that is supposed to justify shiftiness they cut after two, which means that you can ensure that there are only two forms of utilitarianism. But the two that they actually read can see that they're very similar, which means they have not lost any sort of offense. Humanism and Epicureanism are so similar. This is a quote from the card, quote, that the second and the latter is a more moderate approach, which still seeks to maximize happiness, which means the eternal link is still maximizing happiness. So if we win that maximizing happiness is good, then it matters that it is good, then they do not get any offense, and they have not explained why they're so different than the delusion of strat. Strat is wrong. One T should be used to flow, not to be used to prep, which turns their offense, and it's all highlighted and explained in the cards, which are pretty clear at explaining it, which means they do not lose any ground if they just read the cards and flow properly. Resolvability is also wrong. There's no warrant as to why we're irresolvable if we win all of the standards above, which we obviously have. Now the tier C decide it was dropped, so I guess it could be a tiebreaker because the ICC obviously cannot be a good moral community if they maximize authoritarianism and destroy democracy, which we said is good because it maximizes our ability and our autonomy to create sort of syntheses in the first place because we're able to advocate for ourselves. But the submit to jurisdiction account plan was also dropped and captured all of their offense because we submit to jurisdiction of the ICC, which means we're able to join the ICC community and get all of their offense. This is literally game over. The account plan allows the ICC to prosecute US without giving them influence in the court, which applies to every crime against absent aggression, which was dropped. Lack of insurance outweighs insurance case and politicization surrounding the crime of aggression for multinational coalition building where countries for peace reports independently rules military intervention to fail and cause countries to reduce their presence due to the fear of Indian constitution. This causes this is an impact filter hard power lasts to deter aversion over time. Turns case lack of intervention increases war crimes and genocide by recent powers like time and Russia more likely magnitude outweighs which includes all future power extinction outweighs because it includes our ability to experience happiness or experience or reason or create syntheses in the first place. But we'll do that on pace. The issue top level here is that they've just dropped the process counter plan literally does the act and then submit to jurisdiction of the act just with which basically means the US is able to prosecute the ICC. They're just not able to change the norms of the ICC in order to exploit loopholes, which one of the evidence says that inevitably the US, if they join the ICC, will exploit loopholes and make the community a not moral community anymore because the US will just use it for their own benefit, which is using the ICC as a means to an end, which is obviously bad and does not treat everyone with moral respect because the US is changing the rules which they say are so great in the status quo, which means that there's no way way that the affirmative can do this because the affirmative inevitably causes the US to change to change the ICC and shape it to be less moral, but the counterplan does not allow the US to do the same thing. It just submits them to jurisdiction, which means the counterplan essentially allows the US to join this moral community without changing it, which captures literally all of their offense, especially when they have dropped that induction is good, which means you know for sure that the counterplan is solved because we can make our predictions. Our predictions are better and more tailored. Our predictions are better and more tailored. There's just no out here when they've conceded that we literally do the act and join this moral community, which captures all of their offense. Now, Kate. Top level on cases. First, they have dropped that induction is our only hope and possible, which means that you know for certain that the counterplan can solve, and you know for certain that induction that we are able to predict in the future. That we're able to predict in the future. Plus, they just dropped the scenario, which means you can assume that it's true because they have not read any defense against any of our scenarios, which means that it proves induction is true here. That's some key evidence, which is excellent. Explaining why induction is literally our only hope, which means we have to be able to conduct consequences and allocate our time towards towards predicting consequences in the future. Now I'll extend the consequentialism work, which were also all dropped in the one and see. First is that the only way to fulfill their ideals is by treating everyone as equal. Otherwise, some people's interests are given infinite weight. This is the inherent equal respect card. So depending on the causal structure of the interests and situations, some are not morally equal. Their own moral theory violates that principle that people are morally equal because Crossix proves that they only care about wiping their hands clean of any sort of violations, even if it causes violations in the future. Hare says that people be infinitely inviolable is not treating them as equal because in real situations some interests outweigh others, i.e. why we should choose to some interests outweigh others, which i.e. why we should choose consequentialism because it allows us to weigh between moral theories and choose what is going to produce the best consequences by treating everyone equally and maximizing most happiness. Now I'll extend Kaminsky, which is also dropped in excellent unsuspected. You can see sense of rationality is the source of value and rationally stemmed from the existence of human beings being able to do that. That also is a warrant for extinction outweighs because it means that human beings are not able to have any sort of rationality or not able to conduct new syntheses, etc. They are not they're not alive on this earth to do so. Either we have to promote the ends of rational beings or moral laws instead of promoting the existence of rational beings. Is a quote from the Kaminsky evidence, which is pretty clear on explaining why we need to promote the ends and view consequentialism as possible. They also dropped no intent force extinction, which is the other pair evidence, which explains why we intuitively internalize consequences, which means we cannot do something without looking at the consequence of an action. I.e., induction is always going to be inevitable, and looking at a consequence is always going to be inevitable. So consequentialism, anything that's not consequentialism, is impossible.
I use three.
Yeah.
Alright, I just use two now. Where would it be? Like the overdue stuff and then stay.
Where would you like me to flow the overview stuff?
So just like, there's like the paradigm issues that there's,
Right, what page would you like?
probably at the shelf.
Okay, you got
I'm good with that.
it. Okay.
I'm gonna.
Conceded fairness is a matter constrained on the judge's ability to evaluate the round, which means that even if there's 1% risk anything was unfair, it should be enough to determine the judge's ability to evaluate the substance of the debate. This means that procedural fairness is a side constraint to the judge's ability to actually evaluate the substance of the debate. We tell you that procedural fairness is a side constraint because every single one of the arguments that is made in this round presumes that they will be evaluated fairly, so it concedes the authority of fairness. B, it's an a priori question to engaging in the substance debate because it becomes impossible to objectively evaluate if they win a reasoned fairness or the flow doesn't matter half against them because they justify the arbitrary decision. These are two dropped arguments, and they say that extinction outweighs it. The only word here is that happiness is intrinsic to life and is a prerequisite to everything else. But no, we tell you we care about the procedures of fairness because absent that, I have no ability to engage in their theory of the good. But they've also conceded that they don't get to weigh case on the theory layer, and we tell you that you evaluate the theory page before the substance page because it up layers. Even if you buy that extinction does outweigh, that bites into the shell because I have no idea why extinction outweighs until the two-way are. Now extend our interpretation that if either debater defends a consequentialist framework, they must explicitly delineate which theory of the good they defend in the form of the text they're constructed. Extend the massing evidence that tells you there are 7 different versions of utilitarianism, and importantly, there are 2, Epicureanism and hedonism. These 2 are entirely different versions of consequentialism because the massing card explicitly states that there's no different. There are different definitions of happiness, and these consequentialist theories defend, which means that hedonism and Epicureanism define happiness differently. Now their counterinterpretation of saying that they can read a framework that is maximizing expected well-being doesn't actually answer my interpretation or my warrants. My interpretation does not say that you cannot read util or you cannot read maximizing expected well-being. Rather, we tell you that it is unfair not to specify which consequentialist theory that any debater defends. Here's the line by line. They say that cross-applied util is good. I agree that their theory is good. I just don't know which theory of the good they actually defend. So it becomes impossible for the 1 AR to enter excuse the debate because they will get 13 minutes to make arguments, whereas I only get the 2 AR. Now, they say util is more accessible, but again, this isn't our argument, and that the same thing cross applies to the 4 wrongness point. Now, so now the warrants. Extend the violation of how maximizing expected well-being and conflicting theories of utilitarianism and cross-ex was a violation. The 1 NDCA case does not specify either. Now we're going to only go for the shiftiness warrant. Then they say that they're not shifting because hedonism and Epicureanism are similar, but I already justified why they're not similar above. We tell you that shiftiness is a voting issue because they can shift out my terms based on whatever theory of the good they operate under due to the nature of the vague standard, especially true because their warrants for their standard do justify different versions of consequentialism as coming first. They do not defend the violation, and I wouldn't know until 2 AR, which gives them the 13-3 time advantage, and also conceded that it gives them access to multiple contingent layers. Now they say explain their cards, but again, our argument is that their explanations are contradictory. And now you have to drop them for this because we have proven the true abuse story of how this round was unfair, and there's no way for me to actually engage in this debate.
I'm trying to end this.